Hi, this is Emily of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
I'm the Greg.
And I am Dave Show.
We host the Greg and Dave Show on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out our show, The Greg and Dave Show, where we talk about strange, bizarre, and sometimes just downright quirky news stories that you may not have heard about.
A new show comes out every Wednesday. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. And hey, thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Today we're going to talk about the NWSL title game. We're going to talk about some Champions League as well. And we're going to talk about the FIFA awards that just happened. Breaking news, people.
Breaking by time of the show recording. We are able to do that here on Your Soccer Passport by our sponsor, Squadcast. As podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from around the world, being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files, then uploaded to host computer, allowing solid audio quality. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. Yvonne led up to it, the FIFA The Best Awards actually causing our show to be recorded later than ever before, much to the mire of our editors and people back at Public House Media who are furious with us in terms of how late we're actually recording this thing. So that is our dedication to you as the fans here for this kind of announcement. But we're going to start right off with it. The top two awards, best player, the best on the men's side, Luka Modric. On the women's side, that goes to Marta. Were these players the best, Yvonne?
With Marta, I'll say yes. With Luka Modric, I'll also say yes. I know there's been a lot of controversy about Messi not even being nominated as one of the top three players. But I look at this kind of the way you look at the MVP voting in the NBA. I mean, if it was just the best player, then LeBron James would probably have the last 11 MVP awards in the NBA. But that's not kind of how it works. So it's a year-by-year kind of thing, season-by-season kind of a thing. And I mean, a big part of it was the run that Croatia had in the World Cup. And you have to weigh that in a World Cup year. It's only around once every 4 years. It's a big thing. He was the catalyst and that engine in a Madrid team that won their third Champions League in a row, fourth championship in 5 years. So, yeah, who would have guessed that Modric would be the one to break the Ronaldo Messi kind of monopoly they had, or duopoly they had in the player award.
And I think that's good because, unlike Messi, who had really overcome a lot to get Argentina out of the group stage when it was a big surprise for them to go down initially to Croatia, of all people, which I believe there, if my memory serves accurate. Messi did do a lot, and he is that person that's been there. But I was surprised to see Salah included in the best player of the year after how bad things went for Egypt at the World Cup. I thought that Salah was right there on the fence about whether he could be included or not. But him winning goal of the year, I think, really pushed a lot of people. His work in the EPL this year really kind of solidified that aspect. And where I thought that all the other players had either a really amazing season for club or really amazing for country, I thought Modric was the only one that had an amazing season for both. He was very clear to be able to handle both club and country that Messi, Ronaldo, Salah were not able to do. And I think that has the big aspect for me. I think Modric was player of the year. He was the best because he was able to do it for both club and country in a way that Messi and Ronaldo and Salah were not able to do it. I do think that it was a lot closer between Salah and Messi to be the finalists. And I do think that if FIFA really wanted to make this a bigger deal, it could have been like the Heisman Awards, where it could be more than just one play, more than just 3 players coming. You could have 4 finalists, you could have 5 finalists. I think that may have been a better thing, because I think that the consistency of what Messi has brought to the table, despite having an off year for him, is still good. I think they could have opened it up for 4 finalists to include Messi in that regard. But to say that it's not, Messi didn't show up, Ronaldo didn't show up. Ronaldo and Messi were both named to the best 11 out of that dream team scenario, along with De Gea, Alves, Varane, Ramos, Marcelo, Modric, Kante, Hazard, Mbappe. They joined Messi and Ronaldo in that dream team scenario, but Messi and Ronaldo weren't there. So I think that has a process in, again, kind of breaking things up. I'm glad that Modric I was glad that Modric was the one that was able to do it, because there were a lot of really good storylines that made him the player to go. I did ask you about both sides. I have reservations about Marta. I'm not exactly sure if Marta was player of the year. She ended it so well, especially with having such a strong focus there with the Copa America titles, winning all 7 games with Brazil there. I really thought Marozan had it. I thought that what Lyon did, and I'm curious if in the voting and in the consideration that having both Marozan and Hegerberg both being from the same club, while Marta was able to go in there and play with the Orlando Pride in the NWSL, if that may have been the situation, almost to what we saw with Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio was nominated for Best Actor in 2 different films, and he split the vote between the 2 of them. And I'm now wondering if the exact opposite happened here, where 2 players from the same team ends up splitting the vote and it going to Marta as well, which, because I do think that she should have been a finalist. I just thought that Marozan had a little bit more in terms of style and grace, in terms of what she brought to the table, and I liked her overall procession of the year a little bit more than what Marta had.
But like what we see a lot when we see this every 4 years with the World Cup or Euros, something like that, a continental tournament, international, does a lot for you. If you dominate that and do really well in that, like Marta did for Brazil, that kind of pushes you, because these international tournaments don't happen every year the way the Champions League and the way these domestic leagues do. And Lyon were dominant, and that's why their coach won male coach of the year for that same reason. But when you and you see it on the men's side as well, when you have a dominating tournament, that helps push it up a little more. There is something, the people who nominate and who vote for this, who are the coaches and the captains, still seem to value international tournaments a lot when it comes to this, and having that month of dominance, that does carry some weight, it looks like, when you look at it, Modric and with Marta, because we talked about Modric. What helped him was how fantastic he was with Croatia. So that same argument can be used for Marta with Brazil.
Brice Burge, Yvonne Sanchez Carrasco here on your Soccer Passport. Let's go over some of the other awards here. Both coaches of the year were Frenchmen, Didier Deschamps for the men, Reinald Pedros for the women. German striker Leonard Thye won the Fair Play Award. The Belgian goalie Thibaut Courtois won a Goalie of the Year. And best fans were awarded to Peru, which is something that a friend of the show, Luis, is very excited about. He helped us out a lot with the World Cup edition of Your Soccer Passport. So congratulations to him in Peru. Out of all these, Yvonne, what award kind of stood out to you in terms of the winner?
I was really surprised Contra was keeper of the year, especially when he didn't when he wasn't on the starting FIFA 11, De Gea was. So I thought that was really interesting. And again, it showed the value of the World Cup because De Gea did not have a good World Cup. Contrao had a fantastic World Cup. So just kind of, it's just so interesting that they split. One is the All-11 Team of the Year, and one is the Goalkeeper of the Year, but it's not the same keeper. So just kind of, I thought that was the most interesting part about it.
I want to give a quick shout out to Leonard Thye, German striker for Venlo. He missed a game against PSV Eindhoven, who is now in the Champions League, and I'm sure we'll bring up at some point in that segment. But he missed a game to donate stem cells to a person fighting leukemia. As a person that is on the stem cell registry to help fight diseases with leukemia and bone marrow and stuff like that, I know how hard it is to find a match. And sometimes you have situations like this where you're either playing an important game that your team needs you, or you have the opportunity to help someone save a life. And so for Thye to do that, I mad respect for that aspect. I was surprised about Courtois as well. But honestly, I think for me the biggest surprise was the Peruvian fans, just because of all the different aspects that deal with the fan vote and like who do you honor in something like this. Two were the nation's group fans, and I was surprised that it went to a nation's group instead of an individual. And the individual in this case was a fan from Chile who traveled hundreds of miles every game to support his team, and he was the only like solo guy in that compared to groups of, and ultimately again the World Cup aspect is popping up again with the Peruvian fans winning this. So don't want to take anything away, but I was a little surprised that they got it over the other ones, because I don't know. I think that maybe the pessimist in me that's coming out just a little bit, because you have three good stories, and yet I'm finding a way to complain about it. But it's so hard to choose what's the best story out of three goodwill stories. So I think they're all winners in their own way.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we can't put one down. We shouldn't put one down to bring up the other one. So they're all great stories. And I mean, again, just showed the value of the World Cup. This Peru hadn't made the World Cup in 34 years, 36 years. And you just saw this flock of just fans who were just so, a lot of them seeing their team in the World Cup for the first time, and some thinking they might never see them again in the World Cup, just really enjoying it. So, it showed that the World Cup has a lot of weight. Euros will have a lot of weight in 2 years. Copa America might have a big weight this summer when you look at somebody like Neymar, who could win a Ballon d'Or or something like that, or Messi, who could win a Ballon d'Or again next year, something like that, or Player of the Year, something of that matter, like how important these international tournaments are in the summer.
Absolutely. Again, congratulations to all of the best award winners. That was just done through, just announced in London. Also, I want to give a good old round of applause for Idris Elba, because
what a charming guy. I love Idris.
I do too, but man, he stunk it up in the award ceremonies. Everybody looked so awkward.
Great vest, though.
It was
great vest.
Yeah, I mean, he had the style down, unlike Mourinho, who had that stupid looking hat on. So like, I don't know. I'm not big on award ceremonies to begin with. Maybe that's where all the negativity.
They're all cheesy. From. So shout out to Idris Elba, killed it. I love him. I'll follow him to the end of time.
Yeah, well, let's just make him the next Bond, so that way we don't have to worry about him doing another award ceremony again. All right, we will take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to talk about the Courage. That's the North Carolina Courage and their NWSL title. That's up next here on Your Soccer Passport.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
And welcome back to Your Soccer Passport. We are on social media, and we would like to hear from you. Don't be afraid to interact with us by following us and liking us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Your Soccer Passport in the search bar will lead you to us. Brice Bergevon, Sanchez Carrasco here with you, talking the NWSL playoffs coming to an end. The most dominant team ever in professional women's soccer in the North American continent here, taking the title with a 3-0 win in Portland. That was the North Carolina Courage. Yvonne, you were at the game. Break it down for us. What did you see in person at that game?
I mean, I saw a dominant North Carolina team. I was thoroughly impressed by their overall, how they played, how well coached they were. The game got off kind of quick start for Portland, but as the game kind of went on, you just saw North Carolina just overwhelm them. On defense, they were so structured, and you never saw the Thorns get able to create anything and get behind the back line of the Courage. Anytime the Thorns were able to get into the final third, they were never able to penetrate that back line, and they just kind of passed the ball around. Similar, like if you watch basketball in a very good defensive team, you watch a team kind of pass around three-point area looking for something, and there's nothing because the defense just swarms. And North Carolina was so good at when a player got the ball, they just had two people going at them so quickly and just closed any gap and just closed any chance for the Thorns to create anything. I don't know if it looked different from watching it on TV, but live, I was just so impressed defensively how well when the Courage were on defense, they pressed the Thorns and made them uncomfortable, and then they were just so comfortable defending that everything just stayed in front of that back line. I don't know if you saw the same thing from TV, but that's how it felt in person. I was just so impressed, especially on defense, how well they were organized and how well coached they were, because they didn't make any mistakes to allow the Thorns to create any chances either.
I think that's the difference when looking at the side on it from the television viewing point, is that you get a lot more close-ups. I don't know how close you were sitting to the field, but you got that nice one shot of different people just so frustrated for Portland. They were not able to connect things. And I honestly, I haven't seen many Portland games this year, maybe a couple, 2 or 3, but they didn't look this bad in any of them. Like it was frustrating to me as a fan, because I thought Chicago did a very much better role in their game against North Carolina than Portland did. Even though that they were at home, they had a lot of the intangibles that would make defending a championship easier for Portland. They then could not connect on these things. And yes, there was good defense. Yes, it was mistake-free soccer. The problem is that you also have a good team that's set on finding opportunities from set pieces, and they weren't able to do anything with those. They were allowing people to get in there with a head. I mean, Dabinia is not known for using her head, but that's the way the first goal came around. You just saw little things that added to the frustration every single play, building, and Portland couldn't get anything from it. Like how much of that was North Carolina compared to Portland not doing well in that game? And I think the television broadcast made it seem, with all the frustrated faces, that it was Portland losing the game compared to all of those great things about North Carolina that you talked about, because it is harder. It was harder during the broadcast to sit there and watch and go, North Carolina's got a good defensive back. They're really closing down that line. There's a couple of distant shots, but they're, Portland wasn't able to get just enough of a space off the ball to really rip those far shots with any kind of power or accuracy to make them more efficient. So it always, the broadcast made it seem like it was Portland's to lose instead of North Carolina's to win, which I think is so weird with how the game actually came about.
Yeah, because I took the complete opposite of it. I thought North Carolina just completely shut Portland off. It just seemed they couldn't create anything. I think a lot of that is credit to North Carolina. The first goal comes from a mistake the Portland backline made when they allowed that break to happen on the left-hand side, and then the shot comes in, goes off the post, and she headers it in. But that doesn't happen if the center defender just kind of doesn't whiff on that chest ball that allowed North Carolina to kind of do a quick break on the left-hand side. And those were the little things that North Carolina didn't do. Those are the little mistakes that they didn't make with the game. And from their goalkeeper to their defense, they were so comfortable on the ball as well, and they were able to really just kind of control the game that way too when they had the ball. Because when they had the ball, they were really patient and they waited and they just kind of took the momentum and kind of helped take the crowd out of the game, which is what there was all these things for the Thorns to have in a potential upset, right? They were playing at home. They're defending champions. There was 21,000 people at the stadium, and it was all Thorn fans. And you just had this kind of recipe for it. If it's going to happen, this is exactly what needs to happen to beat North Carolina. And they weathered the storm early, and they just kind of took the game over. North Carolina did over the Thorns and didn't allow for any of these potential things to happen to manifest themselves for a potential upset. And they were just – I was very impressed about how North Carolina just kind of dominated and kind of didn't allow the Thorns to sniff goal. And I think a lot of that was how well their game plan was and how well coached they were and how disciplined they were. And like the third goal, it looked, my buddy told me from the broadcast who also watched it on TV, looked like it was offsides. And that kind of takes momentum off of a team as well. From the stadium, I couldn't really tell, but I think when you watch the game, the Thorns never had a chance to have a potential offsides goal even manifest itself because of how they just weren't able to break down the defense. So those were the takeaways from the stadium and how dominant North Carolina were, at least from my perspective. They're just very impressive.
And I would, even though you kind of, at least I was kind of ragging on Portland just to touch in that, you also have to admit that North Carolina has done something that hasn't been done yet for the NWSL, which is the team that won the Shield won it all. That hadn't been done before. North Carolina had such a dominant year, 17-6-1, 53 goals for with a 36 goal differential. They were the only team. They had the best goals allowed with 17 goals allowed as well. The only team that got the better of them was the Utah Royals, and they missed the playoffs. So like you can't go against what North Carolina's done, which has been so good. Jess McDonald bringing in Cynthia Dunn late. There was just a ton of great things that North Carolina did, and I'm happy for them because it was kind of toxic, and I do want to talk about this a little bit because you were there as well. But there's got to be a little bit of a talk about Hinkle and the boos that happened at that game. I remember watching the semifinal game, and as I was live tweeting on the show Twitter account the game because I was watching Michigan that one as well. But the boos of that whole entire setup, just the entire weekend for North Carolina. I know Hinkle, who has turned down a spot on the national team because he doesn't want to wear pride jerseys, even though that LGBT relations are huge in all women's sports, not just soccer. She has chosen to stay off of that. But also you had Jessica McDonald get a yellow card for removing her shirt and having a pro-religious message as well. And this happened during the game on Saturday, the title game. And so for us watching at home, That was the only thing that was picked up on the crowd mic. Every time she touched the ball, every time she threw it in, every time she passed it off and on, the crowd was completely against her. And there was a good 10 minutes of game time where they had talked about it on the broadcast about how the supposed neutral site game between North Carolina and Chicago in the semifinal, where Portland fans were doing the same exact booing for Hinkle, threw her off in the semifinals, but she seemed to be okay with it and take it in stride in finals. And with you being there, it's just so surreal. What was it like actually in the stadium when dealing with that whole scenario?
Oh yeah, the boos were loud on Tuesday. They were prominent, but then you add another probably 15,000 more people, all Thorn fans, and it was loud. I mean, and Portland, it's a very progressive city, and part of that, like you mentioned, that LBGT community, it's very embedded with the Timbers and in sports in general, but in the Timbers and the fan section. So when she touched it, the boos rained down, and it was prominent. It was, I won't say an elephant in the room because it was very well known, but I mean, yeah, it's something we knew was going to happen, and to see it happen while we were as what we expected, it wasn't any more or any less. I think anybody who knows the way, the mentality of people from Portland who in the soccer community and what Hinkle believes in. I mean, they were prominent, and they let her know what they felt, and to her credit, it didn't affect her in the finals. I think, and a lot of it had to do how well the team played overall. And yeah, same thing with McDonald. I will say this for McDonald: she was an absolute monster up top for forward. Even as the game went going on, the 70th minute, 80th minute, she was still running past defenders. She was a beast up top for them, and just overwhelmed that back line as well. But yeah, it's something where that specific example for Hinkle I think it's something that we're gonna see more of. I think in soccer, in women's sports, in that balance between those two communities. And she has her beliefs, and so do the people of Portland have their beliefs in what and what they think is okay, was not okay, and they let them know that it was not okay.
The thing is, for me, is that I saw, again, watching on cameras, you can see the close-up of the individual face. The way that she looked on camera on Tuesday against Chicago was not the way that she looked on Saturday against Portland. And that is something that I have to stress, because if that was not a neutral site game, if that was in North Carolina, and Hinkle was thrown off her game in the actual title game with that level of booing, that could have been the mistake that would have gotten, she could have created the mistake that would have got Portland back in. And I think it's tough to talk about what ifs in this scenario, because specifically about what Hinkle has done, she is a very good player. She is a solid defender. She can move the ball around and make good passes, but she did make a couple of mistakes. She threw a ball too far on inbounds. She didn't have as soft of a touch on that first, the initial touch when she was moving the ball around. So there were problems there that I think that Portland could have caught an off-guard Hinkle, and it just kind of got wasted in that neutral site semifinal against Chicago. And if that's a what-if scenario on what is ultimately a political statement, wherever your political views lie on it, that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how it impacted the game. And that is a completely unique scenario that I'm betting Portland fans wish they could have back, to get in her head the way that they did in the semifinals, in the finals when it came against their team in the Thorns.
Yeah, that's a good point. She got a little taste of it on Tuesday, and I think they probably spend the rest of the week here in Portland, so she was able to get adjusted and kind of know what to expect. And that's also why they're professional athletes. That's why they play at the level that they do, because they're able to adapt to hostile situations. And she probably do what most professional athletes do. She got rattled maybe in the first couple of minutes, and then she got used to it and adjusted to it. And by the second half, I think scoring goals also helps. So when their other team's winning, it makes the boo when you're winning, it makes the boos not hurt as much either. So that's the other thing. But it's that mental toughness that professional athletes have as well when they're able to kind of absorb this hostile situation, and it's probably almost fuel them in a way, because she did have the assist for the second goal too. That's the other thing to notice.
She did, and I think that's a big one too. Especially because that was right before
halftime.
It was right before halftime, and and more importantly, it was right before Dunn did the flop.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was Dunn or it may have been McDonald, but I feel like it was Dunn. Didn't like the lack of didn't like a free kick that was awarded off of a foul, and she literally goes up and takes a dive in front of this stuff. That's a red card in Europe. That's not. I mean, that is straight up disrespect. We have all this talk recently about with Williams going out there and going after the guy, the tennis judge, and all of the fallout that happened here. And it reminds me why I like American soccer and the influence that the women have in inserting American swagger, if you will, into the game worldwide, because that is not something that you'd be able to pull in the EPL league or international leagues or anything like that. And she just straight up did it in front of a judge in here. So I wish people saw the tenacity that female soccer players in the NWSL specifically do to get that kind of stuff in there, because I love it. I think it's only good for the game, and I think it's good for women's sports to have that kind of tenacity to discuss what we did today with Hinkle, with Dunn, with McDonald to away, just the way that people are going off, the fan reaction for Portland, all of this, like as much as it, people may want a different result, I think it's a win for women's sports. I think it's a win for soccer fans across the world. And ultimately, I'm glad that it happened, and I'm happy for North Carolina, because the other thing too that comes up with this is that North Carolina is coming back to an area ravaged by a hurricane. I remember when Japan won the World Cup previously, and I forget the exact year, but when Japan won the Women's World Cup and they went back to Japan after having all of those hurricanes, nuclear power plants being affected, all that other kind of stuff, and how much that win meant for them. I'm happy for the people of North Carolina to have this rigorous win by a dominant team, a dominant performance, probably the greatest NWSL team ever, getting this title. I think it's good for soccer.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to North Carolina for that dominant performance, both the regular season, and they proved it in the playoffs too, that they were able to. They didn't even host either game. They didn't have best team in the league, best team in NWL history, and they didn't host a playoff game. And they went into two hostile environments, because Tuesday was a very pro-Chicago crowd from all the Portland people, and they came away scoring 5 goals and allowing 0, and kind of showed the dominance they had in the playoffs in the regular season. So shout out to them. Thorns, shout out to them too. They had a fantastic season. They picked it up at the end, really pushed hard into the finals, and I think something to build off of. Great thing for NWSL and women's soccer. Over 21,000 people went to the game, which is a record. They said it was a record for a NWSL game. I was there. I could believe it. The whole place was packed, and it was red. But yeah, and hopefully we still have a job by next year. I'm going. I got season tickets for the most part, so I'll be giving plenty of updates to the Thorn Soccer. So keep out for look that if Open House Media keeps us with a job. So yeah, shout out to that.
Absolutely, and we're excited about that. I know I'm going to be. I don't know where I'll be by the end of next year in terms of living situations. Hopefully, I'm not up in no man's land in the UP of Michigan and can actually get to a game somewhat regularly. But I got family back in Chicagoland. I can go check out the Red Stars of the Fire eventually. So that being said, we've taken an extremely long time in this middle segment. There was a lot to talk about that ultimately went well for women's soccer. So we will take a break on that note. When we return, it will be worldwide headlines up here next on Your Soccer Passport. Time now for Worldwide Headlines here on Your Soccer Passport, a segment touching on some of the other big news from around the soccer world. Tigres defeated Toronto FC 3-1 in the first ever Campeones Cup, a game between the champions of Liga MX and Major League Soccer. Jesus Duenas scored twice before Eric Zavaleta owned goal to create a 3-0 deficit. Lucas Janssen added a garbage goal off of a penalty kick later to get the final score. N'Golo Kante is a wanted player for two clubs outside of the EPL. According to Sports Media Net out of Italy, Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain are both looking at acquiring Kante from his current home in Chelsea. The French midfielder is just another name from the successful World Cup team mentioned in the last few weeks on the club market. And finally, the first team to make the 2019 U17 World Cup in Peru is set. That designation goes to the Solomon Islands, who defeated Fiji 3-1 last Tuesday. New Zealand and Peru are also qualified for the tournament so far. Today's Worldwide Headlines are brought to you by the Public House Media Store Envy online shop. The best way to promote your soccer passport and any other PHM shows is with t-shirts, mugs, and more, all available in the Store Envy shop. Visit publichousemedia.storeenvy.com. That's STORENVY.com. Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport. I'm Brice Burge, Yvonne Sanchez Carrasco too. Follow us on Twitter at Yvonne Sanchez C90 and at that Brice Burge, Brice with an I. UEFA Champions League, first game down in the round robin. All teams have played at least one. We have some front runners, we have some surprises, but Yvonne, for you, what really stood out in the opening act of group play?
For me, the most interesting game was definitely Liverpool-PSG. Liverpool taking 3-2 win after PSG kind of battled back in a game that Liverpool kind of dominated for the most part. And then the next day you have the most interesting thing about that victory was what followed the next day, because everything after Tuesday, after Liverpool beat PSG, was, PSG are the French champions, but they don't get challenged in the French league. The French league's weak, all these things. And then you have Lyon coming in and beating Man City in Manchester, especially after how dominating City were last year in the EPL. I thought it was just it was so ironic that Lyon come in and beat City, pull off this huge upset in the first round of games in the group play after kind of all this talk was built up about PSG being so overwhelmed by Liverpool.
One interesting aspect of that, though, is that everybody kind of just assumed Man City was going to roll through Group F with Lyon, Hoffenheim, and Shakhtar Donetsk. And so to just kind of roll through that group, is there a possibility that Lyon is not that good and Man City was just kind of not paying attention, trap game scenario? Or is it more based on Lyon actually being worthwhile against their English counterparts?
I think it's a combination. I think Lyon's a solid team. And I think City probably had an off game. Combination of the two. It'll be interesting to see how Lyon do in the rest of the group stage, because I think when the goal is to get I think in entering this group, everybody thought Man City gets first, and it's a battle for second between Lyon, Hoffenheim, and Shakhtar. So they got a 3 points they weren't expecting. So now, how can they navigate the rest of the 4 games against Hoffenheim and Shakhtar? So I guess we'll see with time. The other game that was really good was Inter beating Tottenham after scoring 2 goals in the last 10 minutes after it seemed like the Spurs had it, and this kind of manifests itself to a really bad week Spurs had too, counting the EPL defeat earlier in the week to Liverpool, and then just blowing in the last second to Inter Milan in a very tough group with PSG and Barcelona.
Absolutely, and those all have such a huge impact. We had talked about Group E potentially being the group of death, and now the only thing that I think Tottenham has in their hopes right now is that it was only a 1-goal loss, and they still have the ability to play PSV Eindhoven, who got blown out of the water by Barcelona. So you have a definite low end of the group in Eindhoven where Tottenham could force the issue with a draw or a win, and then win big against Eindhoven. They could really make something happen, but that was the only group of surprises, per se, where there wasn't a draw. Group C, the more typical group of death with Liverpool, Red Star Belgrade, Napoli, and PSG. Red Star Belgrade was just kind of a throwaway, and they drew a scoreless draw with Napoli. I mean, that's 1 point for them, and that could have been the difference between second or third, is whether or not Red Star could actually steal away a point from somebody. And so that makes that PSG loss even so much bigger. And then when you're also talking on the other side of that, Hoffenheim and Shakhtar also drew 2-2. So now Man City is way behind in goals scored, goals and in goal differential. So if there's a possibility where you might have a tie later on, Man City also has to start thinking about tiebreakers and making sure that they win big against Hoffenheim or Shakhtar or both, just to make sure that they can guarantee moving along now that they're down a game and last in that group. It is interesting to see how they're all coming along because they've just kind of had that setup where one game down and there's so much time in between the next game in play that mathematics between all of that pops up a lot. It makes a lot of fun fodder for people like us because, like you always have more time, you can talk more about it. We as a once a week podcast obviously have the ability to dive into that stuff a little bit more in terms of figuring out the math and everything, but it's not necessarily anything else. I will say that I'm a little surprised that Schalke was able to get a draw against Porto. I thought Schalke's been struggling all year in the Bundesliga, and they looked like they finally put a game together from beginning to end where they didn't have noticeable mistakes. Like, I mean, they allowed the goal. That's fine. That was a good play. It's understandable. But Schalke looked just so broken up throughout things this year that they were able to just kind of get lucky and make less mistakes than other weaker Bundesliga opponents. But they held up all right against Porto. So I'm happy that they were able to not look terrible in Champions League here in Group D. Galatasaray is up after winning 3-0 against Moscow, so that's kind of where that group is set up. But now we go up into the next set of games. What will you be paying attention to most in the second active group stage?
Yeah, just to round out the first round of games, Ronaldo got red carded, kind of weak red card for him and Juve. They still pulled out a 2-0 win over Sevilla. And 2 U.S. players scored. You got Pulisic for Dortmund scoring, and then McKinney scoring as well for Shakhtar in that game you're talking about. So those are good things for U.S. soccer. Next round, you just want to see how those teams how PSG bounced back, how Man City bounced back as well. Kind of the inconsistencies with Man United. They win midweek against Young Boys and they lose, and then they draw to Wolves in the in the EPL. So how the consistency goes were kind of things I would look forward to. Watch for Barcelona, how they continue to kind of play, and also Real Madrid. They had a very dominating 3-0 win over Roma against a team that was in the semifinals last year, and they looked like they haven't skipped a beat even without Ronaldo. So some quick things to look out for the next round too.
All right, that will do it for this week's show. Longer show than usual, but it is awkward with having so much with a title game and having so much with the FIFA The Best Awards that there's just a lot there for us to handle. So we're going to have a longer show. Thanks for joining us for the entirety of it. Remember to subscribe to Your Soccer Passport on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever your favorite podcasts are found. Give us a like on social media. And one thing that we would like to ask this week more than others, share our show on social media. We've been slowly starting up, and we want to be bigger. We want to reach more people. We want to get more guests on. And we believe that with your shares and your inclusion with us to make this podcast better, will truly create a better experience for not just us, but you as the listener. So give us a listen, give us a shout out, give us some feedback, and interact with us on social media in that regards. But for right now, I'm Brice Burge.
Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Shout out to everybody. Usually give a shout out after these. Shout out to everybody right now. Give some love.
All right. You've just listened to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.